Hi everyone, it's Eugen Lee and you're listening to Money She Wrote, the official podcast for Money Crashers, where we take a closer look at how to make money work for you. We'll discuss how to set you and your children up for financial literacy and success. On today's episode, I have Steve Sexton, CEO of Sexton Advisory Group, a financial consulting firm that specializes in retirement strategies and investment planning, and also podcast host of Saving with Steve. Hi Steve, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on, Eugen.
Of course. And it goes without saying that you have a successful career in helping others with their finances. But before we get into the actual strategies and advice, can we talk about how you got to where you are today?
Sure. What would you like to know?
Everything. Let's start from the beginning. So,
from the beginning.
What school did you go to?
Well, actually, I'm one of 5 kids, Irish Catholic family. Mm-hmm. So, it was dinner table every night discussing what the day was, the whole shot. My father was in the defense industry. And basically, he's the guy that had worked very, very, very hard. He was usually gone at 6 or 7 in the morning, usually came back about 5 or 6 at night, sometimes later. So we got our work ethic from our dad. I'm a product of private Catholic school education. But most people don't know that even though I'm 6'3", 6'4" right now, I used to be a short kid and I was a late grower. So as a freshman in high school, I was, 5'2". And I was the guy that got, picked on, told I wasn't big enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't fast enough. And a lot of times that was by coaches, not just by the people that were my friends. So my goal was to prove them wrong. And usually I did. I usually was the guy sitting on the bench, but within a short period of time, I was starting to play more, and then became a starter, and then became a significant contributor. And you know what? It was funny because I was a sophomore in high school playing basketball. At the beginning of the basketball season, I was barely 5'2", maybe 5'3". But by the time of the banquet, I was 5'6". And then by the time I started my junior year, I was 6 foot. By the time I started my senior year, I was 6'2", and then I finally got to the point where I was 6'4" in college. So I just kept growing, and it was weird because people who used to pick on me when I was small, they're like, "Oh my God, you got big."
Yeah, that's funny because I'm 5'3" as an adult, so I guess I never had that growth spurt.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have a younger brother that was actually taller. When he got into high school, he was taller than me because he was just really tall. He's the guy that stood out in the middle of the class. That was just the guy that was head and shoulders above everybody else. So, and he's still taller than me. So,
So where did you end up going to college?
Well, I actually started at Fullerton College in Fullerton, California. I was there for a year or so, started working with a company that was 3 weeks old, and then it started expanding. And I helped the company expand through the United States, through Europe and the Pacific Rim. I spent about 8-9 years with that company, and the owner decided he was going to retire, and he said, "Hey, you can keep doing what you want." He actually sold out, but I didn't want to continue to travel the world because that was an 18-hour day job, and I really didn't have a life other than that job. So I came back to the United States. I went to work for the Automobile Club, and that's where I met my wife, and I spent 8-9 years there. And I decided I didn't want the corporate life. I wanted to leave, do my own thing. And I started moving into the, I'm going to say, health insurance, life insurance, a little bit of financial planning. And I had a bout of cancer. It was colon cancer. It was very something different because I was the guy that was in shape. I 7% body fat, 36 pulse. In fact, the first couple of doctors I went to thought I was having an irregular appendicitis. My wife had to actually verbally browbeat one of the doctors who was actually her doctor into getting me a CT to find out what was going on. And I had a blockage and went to a hospital that the doctor, they did a treatment, it didn't work, and then they sent me home. The next day, my wife talked to her mom's doctor at Scripps, and they said to go into emergency right then. And next thing I know, I'm having an emergency surgery I had 13 liters of fluid all backed up behind it. I was about 3 to 4 hours away from going through renal failure. And you know what? I was just very lucky. I spent 7 days in the hospital. 30 days later, I did 6 months worth of chemotherapy. It was a big eye opener because, before that, I was that guy who was always rushing around, trying to get things done, trying to meet with clients, trying to take care of everything. And I would typically show up at my son or daughter's birthday party like 30 minutes before, sometimes a little late because I was always trying to cut the edge. And I also put up with people that I probably shouldn't have put up with. But after going through chemo and all that stuff, you realize, there's a lot of things that are far more important than rushing around and building businesses and things like that. I still did it, but it was one of those things where now it became every single one of my kids' games, I was there. If it's a birthday party, I left 3 or 4 hours early so I can help and be part of everything. And it just became a far better life. And more importantly is I stopped dealing with people who I didn't look forward to seeing. In fact, it was odd. I actually fired a number of clients because my staff, my team didn't look forward to seeing them. I didn't look forward to seeing them. And I just said, this isn't a good relationship. So I think you need to go somewhere else. And that was probably some of the best advice I can ever give anybody in business. Don't deal with anybody you don't look forward to seeing.
Wow. I could empathize with that story so much. One of my closest friends who works at a hedge fund, we have my older 2 kids and her 2 kids are around the same age. And as soon as her second kids were born, they're 10 days apart. Right after, she found out that she has stage 4 colorectal and liver cancer. She still to this day believes that it was the stress from work that caused it. Because she was like you, she was very healthy, she was fit, but she was always stressed. She worked grueling hours. She was always anxious. It's a lot. It takes a lot on you, and it's a very male dominated industry, and so you just have to put up a bigger stance. You just have to be strong, and she was doing that, but it was eating her up inside. So after 2 years of 16 surgeries and chemotherapy, she went through a lot of surgeries because they were able to remove her colon, but then it also spread to her liver. Luckily, though, the liver is the only organ in the body that can regenerate itself. So how they went about fixing the cancer, removing the cancer from the liver, was that they would clamp down and let that part of the liver rot, and then they would cut it off. After a month or so, they would clamp another part, and so slowly it will it's regenerating itself. So it took about 16 surgeries. But I'm so happy to say she's cancer free. But yeah, so I thank you for sharing that story. And I'm sure that for you, it kind of changed not only the whole aspect of how you're living your life, but you wanted to focus on other things as well too, like your children's sports games, their birthday parties. And also, I remember you sharing with me that when you were in the hospital and you were watching other people go through chemotherapy, you realized that there was a big importance that needed to be placed on figuring out your finances in case your spouse passed away or in case there was a change in the family dynamics. So can you kind of talk more about that?
Sure. You know what? When I went to chemo, everybody kind of, tough times. So everybody kind of supported each other and, asked how are you doing and stuff like that. And I became really good friends with a couple. The real name is Don and Betty, but I'll just say Don and Betty. But what is it? Betty called me one day and she thought Don was having a heart attack. And she asked me to come over after I told her to call 911. By the time I walked through the back door or front door into the backyard, he had passed away from that heart attack. And less than 30 days later, she's calling me and she's in this total spiral of despair because, you know what, she's 47, hadn't worked in 20 years, you know, two boys, a sophomore and a junior in high school. She's, you know, got the house, but she's just going nuts because, you know what, she's thinking, I got to go back to college. I'm going to take a minimum job. I'm going to have to sell the house. I'm going to be destitute because I got two boys. They need to go to graduate. They need to go to college, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, it took us about 30 days to unravel some of the decisions that were made with their previous advisor while John was going through chemo, and that funnel, so to speak. It's just, you have blinders on because you're just focused on that. You know, now, you know, everything's great because she's, you know, the boys graduated from high school. They went on to college. They got good jobs. They got married. She has 4 grandkids. She travels. Everything's really great. But most people, they focus, you know, husband and wife are working nowadays. They don't focus on things like getting a will and trust. They don't focus on making sure, hey, what if one of us passes away? Will there be something left for them so they can continue their life? And I'm just not being there. And it's just really interesting that how people focus on other things, but not the finances. But a lot of times the finances will make or break the difference in your spouse's life, you know, when they're that survivor.
Mm-hmm. So what are the top basic things that one needs to do in order to prepare for an emergency like that?
Okay, first of all, you want to have a will and trust, but I want to say there's a number of documents. First of all, you have a trust, a will, and then there's the power of attorney over your financial, power of attorney over your health. You obviously have what's called a do not resuscitate. But, you know, those 5 documents will make all the difference in the world. So if we start with the do not resuscitate, you know what, if you're in the, you know, 5th stage of Alzheimer's and you got multiple other health problems, okay, and, you know, the doctor says, hey, I think we need to have another surgery, you know what, you could have somebody say, no, we're not. Okay. And that's what that document really does. Hey, look, we're not going to go in that direction. If I'm in a place where I'm not going to come back from it, you know what, just, you know, take me off life support. And then you have durable powers of attorney, durables over finance and health. So think of this. If you're not able to make financial decisions for yourself, okay, you designate somebody to do that for you. These 2 documents basically save your life. Okay. So think about this. You get in a car accident, you're incapacitated, and you have to have your bills paid to stay in your house, your taxes done. You're designating somebody to do that. Okay. Somebody that you like and trust that'll be a good steward of your money. If it's one of those things where if it's durable power over healthcare, that person's determining what procedures to have. So, for example, one of my clients, she was in Los Angeles, and at a period of time when Martin Luther King Hospital in LA was considered the worst. I mean, there was more people dying of staph infections than anything else over there. And you know what? Her husband had a stroke on the side of the freeway. They brought him to Martin Luther King because she had that power of attorney over healthcare. She was able to walk into that hospital and say, hey, here, you know what? My husband's going to Cedars-Sinai. And you know what? Basically, they got him hooked up, go to Cedars-Sinai, and she believes that's the reason why she's alive, because that'll allow you to fight with the insurance company, with the doctors, to make sure the one you love get the care that they need. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I'm taking notes right now.
Back up. Now we have the will. You know what? My kids are over the age of 18, but a will or pulver will, basically what it does is it says, hey, look, if you have more than $166,000 in your state, okay, it'll pour it'll pour that into the estate, okay? But it'll also give direction on who raises your children that are under the age of 18, who handles the finances, things like that, okay? And then we have a trust. Now think of it, a trust is this. If you don't have a trust, your estate's going to go and probate if it's over $166,000. And what probate is your estate's filing a lawsuit against itself, funding that lawsuit to determine who gets your money. And guess what? The state of California gets to determine that. Okay. So the worst example I've seen of somebody not having a trust and it going bad is one of the people, well, the spouse came to me, but basically what happened is they had 3 kids. Her husband passed away. The house was in both their names. So when he passed away, her portion's still part of the house. So 50% of the house got split by 25% or 50% of that leftover went to her, and the other 50% went to her kids. But her kids were under the age of 18, so they had a custodian that was set up, or a guardian for the kids' affairs, that if mom needed to refinance or sell, that custodian would have to sign off on it. It's a complete mess. So if you have the house in the name of the trust, somebody passes away, it's automatically the surviving spouses, and there's no mess there. So the key here is to stay away from probate, and you do that by having a trust. You protect your family by having your kids who raises them, by having a will, and you save their life by making sure their finances and healthcare are taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's all great information. That's a lot to digest. My husband actually put me in charge of, I have until December 31st to figure it out, and he'll just sign off on it. So I'm really taking notes. So I have a question. So you mentioned your kids, they're over the ages of 18. Can you tell me how you taught them financial literacy, or how you incorporated being responsible with how they use money? Can you share that?
Sure. Actually, my kids being responsible with money actually was something my wife did. So my wife got annoyed going to the toy store by herself when she's looking to get them stuff for gifts, seeing little kids that were screaming and yelling at their mom. They wanted this, they wanted this, and then their mom basically gave in and bought them the toy. Okay. So what my wife did is she says, you know what, we can look and touch and play, but we can't buy. And so they knew the rules was look, touch, play, but you can't buy. If they wanted it, it either had to come at Christmas or their birthday or something like that, or they had to save their own money to get it. Sometimes my wife would say, hey, if you save this much, we will add in this, and then we can go get it. And basically, you know what, my son got to the point where he was shopping just like my wife was, because he was trying to find the best place with the least cost price for that toy. In fact, he still does it today, and he's an electrical engineer, and he's looking for specific switches, or I don't even understand the stuff, but he looks for that, but he shops around all over the place to find the best price. And it's still there today. And my daughter does similar things. So that's part of it, was setting a good example of leading your kids, because most people don't realize this, is it's monkey see, monkey do with kids. They don't listen to what you say. They watch what you do, and they mimic that. So if they mimic mom going to the store and, buying, popsicles and everything that's bad for you, they're going to go, okay, well, I'm going to do what mom did. But if they say, hey, like if I have a healthy diet and I can, mom's going to go get those things and have a list and be prepared for that. The other nice thing about it is the example of sticking to the list of things you're going to buy at a grocery store and having kids watch you do that is setting them up for success by them going, okay, I got to make a list every time I go to the store. Or if I'm going to go buy something online, I'm only going to buy the thing that I want, not all the other stuff, because I don't need that. So it's just that example. The other thing was having family meetings about how we handle our money. So, for example, I was just thinking this when we were talking last time. We made a decision from what was going on with the public school system to have our kids go into private school, and that meant, thousands of dollars that we were putting on other things going towards that private school, and we wanted to do that. But we wanted to make sure kids understood what that meant. And you know what? They were in 4th and 5th grade, but they said, I go, do you understand? That means we might not be going on as many trips. That means we might not be doing this. We might not be doing that. And you know what? They understood that, and they didn't have a problem with it, but they understood why we're doing that. We were giving up something to give them something better, and they knew that they had part of that. So
that's really great.
And let's see. And then we always talked about a few things with family meetings, because my folks were, my kids actually, you know how they like to go out to eat at a McDonald's or someplace like that because everybody else is going.
Right.
We had a discussion about our budget, okay, and what was in the budget, and what was out of the budget. And we showed them, hey, look, you know what? If we eat in and mom makes the meals, this is what we're spending. But if we eat out twice, that equals what we spent for the whole week. And we don't want to waste all that money doing that. Now, don't get me wrong. We, took them out for pizza and stuff like that from time to time. And we usually had a once a week type night out deal. But they understood that, hey, there's trade-offs. And you know what? They had chores. So those chores, they got an allowance for. If they didn't do all their chores, they didn't get all the money. Okay. And if they didn't do a good job, they didn't get any money. So the example is set, hey, I need to do the right thing. I got to do a good job, a full job. And you know what? That was the example. You do it right. You do it right the first time, and you get paid for doing it right. And we also gave them little stretch things too. So for example, if they were to clean their rooms, vacuum the house, and then if they did some weeding, they hated weeding. So if we did some weeding, you're going to get an extra buck. So it was one of those things where, hey, if you did all that stuff and then you did this, there was some extra in it for you. So hey, there's the goal there was to teach them there's a trade-off for the extra effort.
I think I hope they understand how lucky they are to have had that kind of upbringing and that education from their parents. What do you think would be the advice for people who didn't have that kind of initial introduction to responsibility, budgeting, planning? What would your advice be for them?
If you're a parent, this is the perfect time to lead by example. And one of the things you can do is leading by example is, go write down your budget, or not what your budget, what you're spending on, what your income is. Figure out the things you need, you're wasting money on, cut it down so you can start saving. And there's nothing wrong with showing them that. And the reason why they say there's nothing wrong with showing them that is my daughter's getting her master's degree. She worked for the first 3 years of college, but now she's just a teacher's assistant. And what we've done is she's figured out exactly how much she has, what she can spend on a monthly basis. And, this will take her all the way through until she starts her job that she's been offered after an internship. Okay. And, but the thing here is this, she's not, I'm going to say, freaking out about money. Once she was when she started the year, because she wasn't going to be working, which means there's a significant amount of money, like $800 or $900 a month, that wasn't going to be there. But when she realized that she had saved and the TA position money that's coming in, plus the grants that she was getting, she did her whole budget and figured out, hey, if I spend this much money, I'm going to be just fine. And she stopped worrying about it because she knew she had it under control. And the nice thing about it is she's also speaking up. She's due to go to a bachelorette weekend, and the person who's doing the bachelorette weekend is the sister of the bride-to-be, but the sister of the bride-to-be is 16 and has no real concept of the money side of things. So she's like, oh, we're going to do this. It's going to be $300 here, $400 here, $500 here. And my daughter goes, hey, if it's like that, I can't go. I can handle the $300, but after that, I can't go. And it's one of those things where, she understands where her limits are, and she'll actually say it, which is more important, because you need to be able to speak up and say, I can't do that. Okay. It's not in the budget. It might be in the budget in a year or two when I'm working all the time, no problems, but it's not in the budget right now. So
she's a smart girl. She definitely is.
I believe she is.
What was I going to ask you? So you're very good at budgeting and planning, but what are some ways you like to splurge your money on?
Oh, what do we like to splurge our money on? For me, it's experiences. So, for example, just this last weekend, the experience was going to Idaho to visit my daughter. And the girl that's getting married, her parents showed up. We went to the Boise State, San Diego State football game. We also, oddly enough, we went to the zoo there. Yes, Boise has a zoo. Our whole experience was walking around the downtown area, which is really great because they got the Capitol there and all that stuff, going into different places to experience the food or the drink or the community there. And we love experiences. So, you know what, I've been lucky enough where we got to go to the Vatican Museum after seeing the Sistine Chapel. We got brought in with a bunch of other people as part of an organization, and they had the three tenors sing to us. That experience, my kids have never forgotten. And they were 9 years old at the time. They were just blown away that they got to do something like that. And it's one of those things that we'll never forget. One of my experiences that I'll never forget is I went on a safari in South Africa. So,
oh my gosh,
you know what?
Dream.
Oh, I'm going to say this. Lion country safari, any zoo just doesn't cut it. Because I saw in the wet season, the grass is like 8-10 feet, but there was a giraffe's head, you know, his shoulders and above was there. And it's just really cool to see that. You hear like the wild where you see like there was actually a rhino. We couldn't really see the rhino, but you can hear him grunting and moving and starting to move. It was very scary. We've seen water holes where, you know, the alligators or the lions go after their prey. And that's just really eye-opening. And I'm getting goosebumps just telling you about it right now. Cause I mean, that was many, many years ago for me, like, you know, almost 25, almost 30 years ago. But it's one of those things I will never, ever forget in my life. So I've been able to do some of those things. I've been to the Australian Zoo before. Remember Steve Irwin, crocodile hunter, used to have the TV series.
Yes.
His dad used to run the Australian Zoo. And he actually they had this big, gigantic alligator, probably 18, 20 feet long, big prehistoric head. And this thing, it was so crazy that he had a little chicken on a rope and he started tossing it out there and stuff like that. Oh, he's not hungry. And he tossed it out there and went, wham! It was so fast that the alligator got it. And he goes, this is the reason why you don't swim in the water where you see an alligator sign. Because they're so fast and so quick, no matter how big they are. And it was just one of those things you'd never, ever forget. And for me now, it's just all experiences. So whatever I do, if it's going to a winery, I want to experience how they make the grapes, how they do all that stuff. It's just the experience, because that's the thing I'm going to remember. None of them, you know, I'm going to remember the experiences, not the material things.
I agree. I love traveling, especially with my kids. I feel like experiencing it together, you have these great memories. And I'm not a zoo person. When you mentioned initially that you went to the zoo, I'm like, why would someone with that little children be at the zoo? But one of my big bucket list dreams is to go to South Africa, to do the safari, to kind of watch from afar the Great Migration. Like, I want to feel the ground trembling, you know, like I want to feel things. And I would love to go. It's just, unfortunately, my children are too young right now. And like the amount of shots you need to get to go, I think it's like the yellow fever, malaria. It's the side effects are too much for my young kids, but I can't wait to go one day. I really can't.
It will be, I will say this, it will be the best experience of your life, bar none. I've been able, with my travels overseas, I've been able to see many things. You know, I've been to this Stonehenge. I've been to the Salisbury Cathedral where they have one of the 4 Magna Cartas. It's just, you know, I won't give up those experiences. I'll never forget them. Sometimes people hear about this experience more than they'd like, but I love talking about them, and because they're just something special.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess the silver lining is that what you went through made these memories, and will continue to make these memories more special. Yeah, they're absolutely priceless. So I have a question. I like to ask this to all my guests. What time do you wake up in the morning? Because I feel like a lot of successful people have a very specific routine. So I just want to know what yours is.
Okay, so I call them like it's like my rhythm. Okay, so I actually get up somewhere between 4:55 and 5:15. You know what, it's just my thing, but I get up, glass of water, I go walk a mile or two, work out, come back and eat breakfast, and then I study something for an hour. So it's my little jam session to go learn and study something. And basically what I do is once a quarter, I change the subject because I want to, master something new and keep learning and keep learning, keep learning. From there, it's about getting ready and going to work. Right. Like today, my 8 o'clock is usually something that I'm working on, but I'm here. So at 9 o'clock, I go into doing some specific things. So I'm like really regimented out. Because if I don't, I'll forget something and things won't get done. And on top of that, I kind of drift. If there was a silver ball popping around here, I'd be looking at it right now. So I was an ADD kid. I called myself a Ritalin child because I couldn't sit still when I was little. I am kind of a little bit at that. I get a little excited and all that stuff. So if I see this, something moving, I'm going to take a look at it. So I have to stay focused. Otherwise, I'm a big little kid still.
We all are. We all are. That's interesting. So what are you currently studying right now?
I'm actually studying leadership. The big thing, I find somebody that I respect and I take their leadership course. So this one I'm taking Darren Hardy's. He's got it's a year-long leadership course and it's called the Hardy Heroes. And basically you study each part of leadership. So right now we're in that part where, many leaders have to make decisions on when to say no. Okay. And even, whether it be leading your family and my wife is a perfect person for this. She, if somebody asks her to do something from a volunteer standpoint, she always says yes. And even though it overwhelms her sometimes and she's got to learn to say no. So when people are in business, they have to learn certain things to say no. So if you look at Steve Jobs, when he took over Apple the second time, he cut out so many different products and some of the people, his executives, like, hey, what did you say no to today? So part of it's learning to say no, doing it in the right way. Other part of it is when you're looking to hire people, you take your time to get the right person, but when you're ready to say goodbye, you do it fast and quick, things like that. You learn that to stay away from you want to hunt for big game, not a mice. So the reason why a lion won't go after a mouse is because it expends more energy than the mouse is worth getting. So it's important to look at that, whether in business, family, spend the time where it's important. So that time could be just sitting on the couch with your kids, talking and having fun or reading them a book. For me, when my kids were little, I loved to read them before they went to bed because I knew that not only it was my time to hang out with them, but it was my time to help instill reading as a virtue and a value and have them to feel good about that. So
reading is a virtue and value. Yes, I agree. I think it's really inspirational that even with all your success, that you just continue to develop yourself as a person and that you feel like there's a need to, because I feel like a lot of people after a certain point kind of plateau. And I think it's because of an ego issue, but then I think the fact that you're trying to continue to learn shows a lot about who you are as a person, that you are, that it's not about just this position or this level. It's about you maximizing who you are as a person and digging as deep as you can and climbing as high as you can. So I think that's really inspirational. I have one last question though.
Sure.
And this is my funny question I love to ask. So if I got a phone call from you, from prison, asking for an attorney, what would be the reason why you got into jail?
That would probably be because somebody tried to hurt my family. I I'm the worst burglar in the world. Okay. And I'm not very good at, lying to people because they find out right afterwards. Okay. The next sentence, what I mean by right afterwards. So, and, perfect example, when I was at the Automobile Club, some person that worked there was buying traveler's checks, saying that they lost them and then getting new ones. And that's actually money laundering. And the guy that was explaining to me was our director of of security, and he's a former FBI guy. And I go, how do people think that way? He goes, that's okay. You're just never going to be a criminal.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, good to know. But you know what? My thing is, I rarely get upset, but the only thing that gets upset is when things bad happen to my family. And if something bad happened to my family, I would be there overprotecting them. And I would probably go overboard if somebody tried to hurt them physically or something like that. And that's probably the reason I would be calling you for an attorney.
That's so funny. No, I just like to ask that. I feel like for me, I'm the same. Like I'm not interested in taking anything that's not mine. Like I don't need to have that bag or that money. It's fine. I don't think I'm greedy that way. I feel like if I were to be put in jail, it's because I got into some sort of fight, like a bar fight. Like as a woman and of color, I feel like there were a lot of social injustices or things said to me or screamed at me at a certain point in my life. So I feel like things like that kind of irk me, and that's how what would fire me up. But besides that, I don't know. I don't know.
You know what? For me, it's just a protection mode.
Yeah.
You know, one of my first jobs was actually a doorman at a bar. So that's why I'm like, it's just, okay, this 5'2" girl swinging at somebody. That's just a funny picture. No offense.
No, sorry, I just muted myself by accident. I don't think I would swing. I think I would throw the glass.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, I could see that because there's, you know what, I actually have seen that.
Yeah.
Actually, I've seen that. Yeah.
But Steve, thank you so much for being on here with me. It was so much fun, and I took so much information that were valuable, and I'm definitely going to apply it to my own life, starting from the will and estate planning to just continue to better myself and to make sure I continue to learn. And so thanks for joining me. And if anyone has questions about retirement strategies, investment planning, you can go to Sexton Advisories Group's website or listen to Steve on his podcast, Saving with Steve. I'll link everything below. Again, Steve, thank you. You're such an inspiration.